The Brazilian leader took part in the AI Impact Summit held in New Delhi yesterday, and he continues his engagements here in New Delhi as part of his visit to India, a bilateral visit at that, with both sides signing a number of MoUs to strengthen the bilateral ties between the two countries. India and Brazil are also members of multilateral organizations such as the BRICS, which comprises Brazil, Russia, India, China and South Africa. They're also members of the Trilateral IPSA grouping comprising India, Brazil and South Africa. Both countries are also part of the G4, the G4 countries that are pushing for UN reform in general and UN Security Council reform in particular. Right, joining me is my colleague Jessica Taneja, who covered that joint press statement for us. Jessica, talk to us about the big takeaways from that event.
Well, of course, the big takeaways are the MOU on rare earth minerals and mining. We all know that Brazil has vast reserves of lithium, which are also needed for modern day tech today, from chips to other technologies. So this is, of course, also focusing on the potential Mercosur deal. Brazil is one of our largest trading partners in the Mercosur group, and perhaps moving ahead and focusing on what Mercosur technicalities and with agreements would look like in the future. Also, the the president and the prime minister focus on taking the bilateral trade from $15 billion to $20 billion in the next 5 years, so a trade mechanism as well. And you heard from the Brazilian president who said that they are against any kind of terrorism in Kashmir. That is a very strong statement coming in from one of the leaders that India has enjoyed a decent relationship with it in the past. You remember Prime Minister had gone to Brazil last year for the BRICS summit, and they also have on mutual grounds, they said the two democracies would continue to take their stand on various other issues, and that has been the case. The world has looked at both India and Brazil and how they've sort of navigated this very complex and complicated geo-economic climate, so to say. And also to mention, Ramesh, the Brazilian delegation is traveling with at least 10 cabinet ministers and a host of business leaders that go up to 200. So this is a huge delegation that has traveled to India. They go to Seoul and South Korea next. But India was an important meeting, so to say, in that sense. Also was part of the AI summit. The focus also shifted to enhancing defense ties. Have to wait for the details as to what exactly is being worked upon, whether it's to do with Embraer or other aspects of the defense deal. We'll get to know that a little bit later. But the focus certainly also remained on Mercosur and India's intention to have a trade deal with Mercosur, Ramesh.
Indeed, you referred to the joint press statement there, Jessica. What were some of the highlights from the joint press statement delivered by both principals, Prime Minister Modi and President Lula?
Well, as I just highlighted, the MOUs that have been exchanged beyond just the traditional sectors of defense and tech, the two, I said, were also focusing on rare earth minerals, and that has become very crucial. Just to give a little bit of context to our viewers, with the way the critical mineral export has been weaponized, in the recent past, supply chains have been disrupted because of weaponization of this very important component that is used in everyday electronics, magnets, anything. You talk gallium, germanium, lithium, which again, as I said, is found in vast reserves in Brazil. So in that sense, I think one of the major highlights of the meeting, I'd say, would be on mining as well as rare earth minerals, which the Indian industry would greatly benefit from. The other aspect, as I said, was also Mercosur, because if they sort of agree on certain technicalities, that would put India ahead of Europe in terms of having a deal with Mercosur, because if you recall, the European Union had a deal and they had almost finalized it, but the European Parliament didn't ratify it in the end because of principal oppositions from France and Germany on agriculture tech. But also today, interestingly, Ramesh, when you heard the two leaders, there was also an MOU and an agreement on expanding the agricultural sector. So that is something, as President Lula said, that India is known as the world's pharmacy and Brazil is known as the world's barn. So that particular aspect of the bilateral relationship and their prominence and their place in the world was also established in the statements today.
Indeed, and also referring to the joint press statements there, Jessica, both sides emphasizing on the need to defend multilateralism. In that context, I need to remind the viewers that both Brazil and India are members of multilateral groupings such as BRICS, which comprises Brazil, Russia, India, China and South Africa. Also IPSA, a trilateral grouping comprising India, Brazil and South Africa. Also the G4 for that matter, Jessica, which is pushing for UN reform. G4 comprising India, Brazil, Germany and Japan.
Yes, that was also something that both the Indian Prime Minister as well as the Brazilian President did stress on. Yes, UN resolutions are important. Reforms is something they're looking forward to work together on as well. And interestingly, you also picked up the point on where both countries seem to have been of the view that they need to defend multilateralism as well as peace. Because from what India and Brazil have seen in the recent past with the change in geoeconomics, a little bit of context there for our viewers, is the tariff uncertainty that was created in a couple of months ago, where Brazil was also was the highest tariff country with about 50% by the American dispensation, and that hasn't changed. But of course, with the US Supreme Court ruling last night, a lot of things look very different right now, with all countries looking at 10% tariffs. But circling back to the point where Brazil and India stand together in multilateralism on democratic reforms in two countries that believe in democratic principles and forms of governance, there is a lot that they shared in common, and perhaps these also stood out as what they currently believe in.
All right, we'll leave it there for now, Jessica. Thank you for that update. Jessica Taneja reporting on the just concluded talks between India and Brazil in New Delhi.